Once upon a time, in a lush green forest, there lived a boastful hare who was known for his incredible speed. He was so fast that he would often race through the woods, leaving other animals far behind. The hare loved to boast about how quickly he could run and often mocked the other animals for being slow. One sunny morning, the hare was out for his usual race when he came across a tortoise. The tortoise was plodding along slowly, taking each step with care. The hare, who had seen the tortoise around the forest many times, chuckled and said, "Look at you, tortoise. You're so slow. I could race you and still have time for a nap before I finish." The tortoise, who was often the quiet and humble one, looked up at the hare and said, "I may be slow, but I can finish a race if I keep going. Why don't we have a race and see who wins?" The other animals, who had overheard the conversation, were surprised. The idea of a tortoise racing the fastest animal in the forest seemed almost laughable. But the tortoise's calm and steady demeanor convinced the animals to agree. The race was set. The animals gathered at the starting line, eager to watch the spectacle. The hare, confident in his victory, was full of excitement and energy, while the tortoise remained quiet and calm, ready to begin. At the signal, the race began. The hare shot off the line like a rocket, his long legs carrying him far ahead in an instant. The tortoise, as expected, moved at a slow, steady pace, taking his time with each step. The hare, confident that he had already won, turned around to look at the tortoise who was far behind. Laughing to himself, he thought, "This will be so easy. I could take a nap, wake up, and still finish the race first." Without a second thought, the hare bounded off to the side of the track and found a cozy spot under a tree. He lay down, closed his eyes, and fell asleep, confident that the tortoise would never catch up. Meanwhile, the tortoise kept moving forward, one step at a time. His pace was slow, but he never stopped. As the hare slept, the tortoise made steady progress, never pausing for a rest. He didn't worry about how fast the hare was, nor did he rush. He was focused on the race, and knew that if he kept going, he could finish. Hours passed, and the sun began to set. The hare woke up with a start, realizing that he had taken a much longer nap than he intended. Panicking, he leapt to his feet and rushed toward the finish line. But when he arrived, he found the tortoise already there, smiling and crossing the finish line. The animals cheered loudly as the tortoise was declared the winner. The hare was stunned. He had underestimated the tortoise and paid the price for his arrogance. The tortoise, though slow, had won by remaining focused and determined, never once stopping or losing faith in his ability to finish. The hare, embarrassed but wiser, approached the tortoise and said, "I learned an important lesson today. Speed is not everything. You were steady and persistent, and that's what made you win." The tortoise nodded and smiled. Slow and steady wins the race. The moral of story reminds us that being persistence, patience, and steady effort often lead to success, while overconfidence and arrogance can lead to failure.
Once upon a time, in a peaceful countryside, there lived a hard-working donkey who spent his days laboring for a kind but busy farmer. The donkey, sturdy and reliable, was tasked with carrying sacks of grain, pulling carts, and helping plow the fields. He did his work without complaint, and though his days were long and his back often sore, he took quiet pride in being useful. The farmer appreciated his strength, but rarely showed affection. The donkey slept in a straw-filled stable and was fed simple food, enough to keep him going, but nothing more. In the same household lived a small lapdog, a pampered little creature with silky fur and sparkling eyes. The dog didn't work, nor was he expected to. Instead, he lounged on fine cushions, ate scraps from the farmer's table, and spent his time playing around the house. The farmer's children adored the lapdog. They would cuddle him, carry him around, and let him curl up in their laps by the fireplace. Even the farmer, who was usually too busy to show much emotion, would occasionally pick the dog up and scratch him behind the ears, laughing as the little creature licked his face. The donkey watched this from a distance with growing curiosity and, eventually, envy. He began to wonder why the dog received so much attention and love, even though he didn't lift a paw to help on the farm. "All I do is work," thought the donkey. "Day in and day out, I carry loads and plow fields. But no one pets me, no one gives me treats or a warm lap to lie on. Perhaps I should act like the lapdog. Then maybe they'll love me too." So one afternoon, when the farmer came home and sat in his armchair to rest, the donkey decided to try something different. He quietly left the stable, made his way to the house, and poked his head through the open door. The farmer's children were inside, playing with the lapdog, who barked happily and wagged his tail. The donkey took a deep breath and stepped into the house, an unusual sight that made the children giggle in surprise. Then, the donkey did something no one expected. He trotted over to the farmer, raised his heavy hooves awkwardly, and tried to climb into the farmer's lap, just as he'd seen the dog do 100 times. The farmer, shocked and alarmed, tried to push him away. The children screamed and scattered, and the lapdog barked frantically, confused and upset. The donkey, in his effort to be loved like the dog, knocked over a chair, trampled a rug, and nearly broke a table. The house was in chaos. Finally, the farmer stood up, red-faced and furious. "What on earth has gotten into you?" he shouted, waving his arms to chase the donkey out of the house. "You're not a lapdog, you're a donkey. You have your place and this isn't it." Ashamed and embarrassed, the donkey lowered his head and slowly returned to the stable. That night, he lay in the straw, thinking about what had happened. He wasn't angry at the dog, nor was he angry at the farmer, but he felt a deep sadness, not because he didn't get what he wanted, but because he had forgotten to value who he really was. The next morning, the farmer came to the stable. His expression was calm now, and he scratched the donkey gently on the neck. "You're a good worker," he said softly. "I couldn't do without you." The donkey blinked, surprised by the kindness in the farmer's voice. It wasn't the warmth given to the lapdog, perhaps, but it was genuine respect, something he hadn't noticed before. From that day on, the donkey worked with his head held a little higher. He no longer tried to be like the lapdog, and he stopped comparing their lives. The dog, for his part, still received cuddles and treats, but he also began spending more time in the yard, sitting quietly with the donkey in the afternoons. Though they were very different, the two animals found peace in each other's company. And so, the donkey learned a valuable lesson. It's better to be loved and respected for who you truly are than to be something you're not, hoping for a different kind of attention. Everyone has a role in life, and every role has its own kind of dignity. The donkey may not have been a lapdog, but he was strong, loyal, and needed. And in the end, that was enough. The moral of the story teaches us, be content with who you are, for trying to be someone you're not can lead to trouble and heartache.
Once, in a small village surrounded by thick woods, there lived two men who claimed to be the closest of friends. They worked together, shared meals, and often strolled along the village paths, talking about life, dreams, and the meaning of loyalty. Their bond, they believed, was unshakable. True friends never abandon each other, one would often say. The other always nodded in agreement. They believed that no matter what happened, they would stand by one another. One morning, with the sun rising gently over the treetops and the birds singing their cheerful songs, the two friends decided to venture into the forest. They had heard stories of wild creatures living deep among the trees, boars, wolves, and even bears, but neither man was concerned. They trusted each other, and their confidence in their friendship made them feel safe. "Whatever we face, we'll face it together," said one. The other smiled and replied, "Always." With that promise between them, they packed a light meal and set off into the forest. The path beneath their feet was soft with fallen leaves. The air was cool and filled with the scent of pine. As they walked, they laughed, swapped stories, and enjoyed the peace of nature. It was a perfect day, but as they moved deeper into the woods, the trees grew taller, the shadows thicker, and the air quieter. The sounds of the forest grew faint, until even the birds seemed to stop singing. Suddenly, a loud rustling came from the bushes ahead. Before they had time to react, a huge bear emerged from the undergrowth. It was a towering creature, with a thick coat of brown fur and eyes that gleamed with wild intensity. The bear's snout twitched as it sniffed the air, locking its gaze on the two men. For a moment, time seemed to stop. In an instant, panic struck the friends. Without a second thought, one of the men turned and sprinted to a nearby tree. He climbed it as fast as his limbs would allow, not looking back, not calling out to his companion, just scrambling to safety. Within seconds, he was hidden high in the branches, safe but silent. His friend was left standing on the forest floor, face to face with a wild bear. The man, still on the ground, knew he couldn't outrun the animal, and there were no trees close enough to climb. Remembering what he'd once heard from a hunter, he quickly dropped to the ground and lay flat, holding his breath and remaining completely still. He hoped the bear would think he was dead and that it would leave him alone. The bear lumbered closer, sniffing the man's body from head to toe. It huffed, nuzzled his head gently with its snout, and even turned him over slightly with a large paw. But the man didn't move a muscle. After what felt like a lifetime, the bear let out a snort, stood still for a moment, and then slowly turned and walked back into the trees. The danger had passed. When the forest was quiet again, the man in the tree slowly climbed down. He looked nervously around, then walked over to his friend, who was now sitting up and dusting himself off. Trying to sound casual, the man said, "That was terrifying. I saw the bear come right up to your ear. It almost looked like it whispered something to you." "What did it say?" The man who had been left on the ground stood up, brushing the dirt from his tunic. He looked at his companion, not with anger, but with a quiet disappointment. His voice was calm, but firm. "Yes," he said, "the bear did whisper something. It told me never to trust a friend who abandons you in your time of need." The words cut deep. The other man opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. There was no defense. In the moment of danger, he had thought only of himself. He had run. He had not tried to help, not even called out a warning. Whatever he had believed about himself, about his loyalty, had been proven false when it mattered most. The two men walked back to the village together, but the warmth between them was gone. The laughter didn't return. The trust that once connected them had been broken, and though they still saw each other around the village, their friendship was never the same again. The moral of the story teaches, in times of peace, many people will call themselves your friend. But true friendship is not measured by words. It is tested in moments of difficulty and fear. When danger comes, when things go wrong, a real friend stays by your side. A false friend disappears at the first sign of trouble. This fable, passed down through generations, carries a message we all need to remember. Friendship is proven not in calm times, but in crisis. Words are easy. Actions reveal the truth.
In a vast and sun-soaked savanna, where tall grasses swayed like waves and the distant horizon shimmered with heat, there lived a mighty lion. He was feared by all, the king of the beasts, a creature of immense strength and majestic presence. His roar echoed for miles, sending birds into the sky and animals fleeing for shelter. But for all his might and the power he held, the lion was lonely. Other animals only approached him in fear or necessity. None dared to sit beside him, share a laugh or offer a kind word. His kingdom stretched wide, yet in his heart there was a quiet emptiness. One hot afternoon, as the lion lay beneath the shade of an old baobab tree, he noticed a small creature approaching. It was a dog, scruffy, thin, with one ear flopped over and a tail that wagged as if greeting an old friend. The lion lifted his massive head and let out a low, rumbling growl, not out of anger, but as a warning. Any other animal would have turned and fled, but not this dog. The little dog stopped a few feet away, sat down and tilted his head. "Was that a growl, or are you just trying to clear your throat?" he asked playfully. The lion blinked, surprised. No one had ever spoken to him like that, so casually, so fearlessly. For a moment, the lion didn't know what to say. Then, something unexpected happened. He chuckled. It was a deep, rumbling sound that startled even himself. The dog grinned and wagged his tail. "You look like you could use some company," he said. The lion studied the little dog for a moment, then nodded. "Perhaps I could," he replied. And from that moment on, the two became inseparable. Each day, the dog would come to the lion's den, bringing stories, energy, and laughter. He would yap about the funny things he'd seen: ants marching in straight lines, birds arguing in the trees, or a turtle that refused to move for hours. The lion, once solemn and silent, began to smile more often. Sometimes they played games. The dog would dart between the lion's paws, teasing him into a gentle chase. Other times, they would rest together, the dog curled up beside the lion's golden mane, both basking in the warmth of the afternoon sun. Word of their unusual friendship spread across the savannah. Many animals were confused. "Why would a powerful lion keep a dog as a companion?" they asked. But the lion didn't care. For the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. He had a friend, not a subject or a servant, but someone who saw beyond his roar and his title. Seasons passed, and their bond only deepened. But as is the way with all stories, change came without warning. One morning, the lion woke to find the dog missing. He waited all day, watching the path the dog usually ran along. But no bark, no paw prints, no cheerful tail in sight. The lion's heart grew heavy. He searched the savannah, roaring the dog's name, frightening creatures he didn't mean to scare. Days turned into a week, but there was no sign of his little friend. Eventually, the lion learned the truth. A group of travelers had passed through the edge of the savannah. Seeing the small, friendly dog alone, they assumed he was a stray. They took him, hoping to give him a better life in a distant city. They had no idea the dog belonged to a lion, the king of the wild. Upon hearing this, the lion returned to his den, his heart aching. The grass didn't seem as green, the sun not as warm. Though he remained powerful, though the animals still bowed before him, the joy had drained from his eyes. He would sit beneath the same baobab tree where they first met, staring into the distance, hoping to hear that familiar bark just once more. But the dog never returned. Still, the lion never forgot. He remembered every tale, every game, every quiet afternoon shared in peace. The memory of that unlikely friendship lived on in his heart like a soft flame, comforting, enduring, and full of meaning. It taught him something no battle ever could, that true friendship has nothing to do with strength, size, or fear. It's about connection, trust, and the joy of being seen for who you truly are. So, when you hear tales of fierce lions ruling the wild, remember this one: of a lion and a dog, a king and a wanderer, who found something rare in a world ruled by instinct, companionship. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful bond of all. The moral of the story teaches us that true friendship is not bound by size, strength, or status. It is built on trust, loyalty, and kindness.
Once upon a time, in a quiet countryside not far from a bustling village, there was an old hollow tree that stood tall on the edge of a peaceful meadow. The tree, though gnarled and weathered with age, was full of life. Inside it lived a community of little birds, sparrows, finches, and doves who had made the tree their home for many generations. They chirped joyfully in the mornings, sang together at dusk, and lived in harmony, always watching out for one another. But not far from the meadow, prowling silently beneath the grass, lived a clever and cunning cat. He was sleek, with fur as dark as shadows and eyes that gleamed like gold coins in the sun. He had watched the birds for days, even weeks, hidden among the bushes. His stomach growled with hunger and his mind plotted with mischief. He had tried before to catch them, but they were too quick and cautious. Every time he crept near, the birds fluttered away in a flurry of wings, calling out warnings to one another. One afternoon, as the sun cast golden rays across the meadow, the cat sat beneath the tree and sighed loudly. "Oh, what a tragedy," he meowed, loud enough for the birds to hear. "How cruel the world is to the sick and the suffering." The birds peered out from their nests, heads tilted with curiosity. They had never heard the cat speak in such a sorrowful tone. One little sparrow, braver than the rest, called down to him, "What's the matter, cat? Why are you crying under our tree?" The cat looked up, his eyes wide with sorrow. "Oh, dear friends," he said, putting on a pitiful voice, "I have changed my ways. I used to be a hunter, it's true, but I've turned from that wicked life. I found peace in the teachings of the forest. Now I seek only love, harmony, and the warmth of companionship." The birds exchanged doubtful glances. "But you're a cat," a dove cooed, "and cats eat birds." "Not anymore," cried the cat dramatically. "I have sworn off meat entirely. I eat only herbs and roots now, just like the gentle deer and rabbits. I have even started meditating in the mornings." He struck a ridiculous pose with his paws together and eyes half closed. The birds laughed a little, unsure whether to believe him. "Why are you lying beneath our tree then?" asked the sparrow suspiciously. "Because I wish to be near you," said the cat. "I want to hear your beautiful songs and perhaps, if you allow me, join in your conversations. I've been lonely for so long and I know now that peace is better than prey." Still uncertain, the birds whispered among themselves. Some thought he might be telling the truth. After all, the cat hadn't attacked or pounced. Others remained wary. "How do we know you're not tricking us?" the finch asked. The cat placed a paw over his heart. "I give you my word. In fact, if it would help, I'll even climb into this basket and tie my tail so I cannot move. That way, you'll see how serious I am about giving up hunting." And with that, the cat did exactly as he said. He jumped into a basket lying nearby and wrapped his tail tightly around himself. He sat still as a statue, blinking slowly in the sun. The birds, feeling a little braver now, flew down from the tree, just a few of them at first, fluttering to the ground several feet away. The cat didn't move. Then more birds followed, chirping cautiously, hopping closer. Just as the smallest dove dared to peck near the cat's paw, his golden eyes flashed open, his muscles tensed, and in a lightning-quick motion, he pounced. The birds screamed and scattered in a burst of feathers. The cat missed his target, but he came dangerously close.
The birds scrambled back into their tree, trembling with fear and furious at the trick they'd nearly fallen for. "You liar!" the sparrow shouted. "You said you had changed." The cat licked his paw casually and replied with a grin, "I may have said many things, little bird, but it's not my fault if you believe them." From that day forward, the birds never trusted the cat again. They kept high in the branches and warned every new bird in the meadow about the clever cat who wore the mask of a saint. And the cat? He still prowled the edge of the meadow, hoping for another chance. But the birds were wiser now, and they had learned a valuable lesson. The moral of the story teaches us to beware of those who pretend to be what they are not. Sweet words may hide sharp claws.
In a quiet meadow at the edge of a dense forest, a sleek, powerful dog named Bristle lived on a small farm. Bristle was no ordinary farm dog. He was known far and wide for his speed and strength. With muscles rippling under his short fur and a tail that wagged with quiet confidence, he often spent his days racing the wind across the fields. No animal dared challenge him. Every morning, he would sprint across the rolling hills, chasing shadows and startling flocks of birds into the sky just to feel the power in his legs. One crisp spring morning, as Bristle sniffed along the edge of the woods, he caught a whiff of something familiar, something quick and tempting. A hare. Without hesitation, Bristle's ears perked up, and he took off like a shot, driven by instinct and the thrill of the chase. His paws pounded the ground like drum beats, and his eyes locked onto a small, nimble creature darting ahead through the grass. That creature was Willow, a wild hare with soft brown fur and a heart full of caution. She had grown up hearing tales of the farmer's dog, the one who ran like lightning and never gave up. But Willow was smart. She didn't rely only on speed. She knew the land, every tree root and tunnel, every thorn bush and burrow. The moment she heard Bristle's heavy breath behind her, she bolted, zigzagging through the field with grace and precision. Bristle was fast, faster than any animal on the farm. He closed the distance quickly, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. But Willow was not just running for fun, she was running for her life. Every step she took was fueled by fear, determination, and instinct. She led Bristle toward a narrow path between two boulders, too slim for his broad shoulders to fit through. She squeezed through with barely an inch to spare. Bristle tried to follow, but he skidded to a halt, blocked by the rocks, panting and frustrated. For a long moment, Bristle stood still, chest heaving, tail low. He stared at the gap where Willow had disappeared. Then with a tired huff, he turned and padded back to the farm, his pride stung by the escape of what should have been an easy catch. Later that afternoon, as Bristle lay in the sun near the barn, a few animals gathered around him. The crow, always eager for gossip, cawed, "We heard about the chase. That hare gave you quite the run, didn't she?" A squirrel added, "I thought you were the fastest. What happened, Bristle?" Their words weren't cruel, but they stung all the same. Bristle didn't snap back or growl. Instead, he looked toward the woods, thoughtful. "She ran for her life," he said quietly. "I only ran for my lunch." The animals fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. In that single sentence, Bristle had spoken a simple truth that echoed louder than any boast. When one runs to survive and the other runs for sport, the outcome is never balanced. Meanwhile, deep in the safety of the forest, Willow sat hidden beneath a tangle of vines. Her heart still raced from the chase, but she was alive. She knew she had survived, not just because she was fast, but because she had something stronger than speed: purpose. Every twist and turn had been made with her life on the line, and in the end, that made all the difference. From that day on, Bristle still ran across the fields, but something had changed. He ran not with the thoughtless confidence of a champion, but with respect for the ones who run not because they want to, but because they must. And whenever he saw a flicker of brown in the distance, he paused, remembering the clever hare who had taught him the greatest lesson of all. The moral of the story teaches us that motivation makes all the difference. One who runs for survival will always outlast one who runs only for a prize.
In a lush, sun-drenched forest near a quiet, reflective lake where the trees whispered ancient stories to the wind and birds sang their daily symphonies, there lived a peacock of unmatched beauty. His tail, an opulent fan of emeralds, sapphires, and gold, shimmered like the surface of the water at dawn. Each morning, as the golden light touched the treetops, the peacock would strut proudly across the open clearing, displaying his brilliant feathers to anyone who would watch. He'd pose near the pond, catching his reflection and admiring his own splendor. The forest creatures, rabbits, squirrels, and songbirds, watched in awe, though some rolled their eyes at the peacock's vanity. He basked in their attention, puffing out his chest, believing himself to be the most magnificent creature in the entire woodland. One day, as the peacock preened beneath a banyan tree, a crane happened to land beside the pond. She was a graceful bird, tall and slender, with feathers of soft gray and white that glowed like mist in the morning light. Her eyes sparkled with intelligence, and her movements were elegant, almost poetic. She bowed politely to the peacock and took a sip from the pond, unbothered by the spectacle he made of himself. The peacock, noticing the new arrival, strutted over arrogantly. "And what are you supposed to be?" he asked with a smirk, his voice laced with mockery. "A bird dressed in fog? No color, no flair? How dreadfully plain." The crane looked up with calm eyes and replied, "I am a crane. I travel across skies, visit faraway lands, and fly where the sun kisses the horizon. What you call plain is what allows me to soar beyond mountains and rivers." The peacock scoffed and turned in a wide arc, fanning his tail proudly. "Well, I may not fly much, but look at me. Look at this display. There's not a creature in the forest that can compare to my beauty. I dazzle the eye. Surely that makes me the superior bird." The crane tilted her head, a gentle smile playing on her beak. "Your feathers are indeed beautiful, and the forest admires them, but beauty alone is not everything. I may not glitter in the sun, but I can ride the winds, feel the clouds beneath me, and travel wherever I wish. My wings are my freedom." The peacock bristled bristled, not used to being challenged. But what good is all that flying if no one stops to admire you? Who looks twice at a gray bird in the sky? He said, chuckling to himself. The crane's voice remained even, yet firm. True worth isn't found in what others see, but in what we can do, how we live, and what we bring into the world. A gilded cage is still a cage. I'd rather fly free and unnoticed than be admired and bound to the ground. The peacock paused, his feathers drooping just slightly. He looked up at the sky where the crane had taken flight with effortless grace, her wings slicing through the air like poetry in motion. The wind carried her higher and higher until she was no more than a silver whisper against the blue. For the first time, the peacock felt something unfamiliar, a longing not for admiration but for freedom. His beautiful feathers, which once felt like a crown, now felt like chains. He fluttered his wings, attempting to lift off, but his weight and the burden of his ornate tail held him down. The applause of the forest creatures meant little in that moment. What was the use of beauty if it anchored him to the earth? As the sun began to set and the colors of the sky mimicked his plumage, the peacock stood quietly by the pond, deep in thought. He realized then that beauty may capture the eye, but it is freedom and purpose that truly lift the spirit. Vanity, he understood, was a fleeting flame, while grace and humility carried the power to endure. The forest grew quiet, and the peacock, once the center of attention, slowly folded his tail and walked away, his head not bowed in shame, but lifted with newfound understanding. Perhaps he could never fly as the crane did, but he could learn to admire qualities beyond appearance, and in doing so, become a little wiser. And so, the tale of the peacock and the crane reminds us, while beauty may draw the gaze, it is inner strength, freedom, and the ability to soar above superficial things that carry true value. The proud may dazzle, but it is the humble who rise. The moral of the story teaches us that true worth lies not in outward beauty, but in inner abilities and the freedom to live with purpose.
Once upon a time, in a quiet corner of the world, there lived a tortoise who spent most of his days resting under the shade of a fig tree. He was slow, as tortoises are, and lived a simple, uneventful life. But as the seasons passed, the tortoise grew restless. He would often gaze up at the birds flying high above, their wings stretched wide, free to roam the skies. The tortoise felt a longing deep inside, a yearning to see the world beyond his small patch of land. He wished, just once, that he could travel far and wide, not trapped by the slow pace of his feet. One day, as he sunned himself near a pond, 2 ducks landed beside him. They splashed and played, laughing about their travels. They spoke of shimmering lakes in the mountains, of forests filled with music, and cities where the sun glinted off rooftops like gold. The tortoise listened with rapt attention, eyes wide with wonder. "Oh, how I wish I could see those places," he sighed. "But alas, I am just a tortoise. I cannot fly." The ducks looked at each other, then back at the tortoise. "Well," said one of them thoughtfully, "perhaps you can't fly, but maybe we could help you travel." The tortoise perked up. "How?" he asked eagerly. The second duck explained, "If you are brave and can hold your mouth closed tight, we could fly you through the air between us. We'll each hold one end of a stick in our beaks, and you must hold the middle part in your mouth. But be warned, you must not open your mouth, not for anything, or you'll fall." The tortoise's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Yes, I can do that," he exclaimed. The ducks cautioned him again. "You must stay silent," they said, "no matter what you see or hear." The tortoise nodded solemnly, gripping the stick with his mouth. With great care, the ducks took off, one on each side of the tortoise. The stick stayed firm between their beaks, and the tortoise hung on tightly with his mouth. Up, up, up they soared, rising higher and higher until the earth below looked like a colorful quilt of green and brown patches. The wind rushed past them, and the tortoise felt a thrill like he had never known before. This was freedom. This was adventure. As they flew over a village, people below looked up in astonishment. Children pointed and shouted, "Look! A flying tortoise! What a strange sight!" Laughter echoed from below, and soon crowds gathered to witness the spectacle. The tortoise, hearing all the attention, felt pride swell within him. He had never been noticed like this before. Everyone was looking at him. But then a man called out, "What a ridiculous creature! A tortoise in the sky! That looks foolish!" And others joined in the teasing. The tortoise, forgetting the warning, opened his mouth to protest, to shout back and defend himself. "I am not foo," but before he could finish, he lost his grip on the stick. In a blink, he tumbled down through the sky, flailing helplessly. The ducks squawked in alarm, but they could do nothing as the tortoise plummeted toward the earth. With a heavy thud, he landed in a muddy patch near a field. Fortunately, the soft mud broke his fall enough to save his shell from cracking, but he was badly shaken and bruised. Slowly, he pulled himself together, embarrassed and regretful. The ducks flew down to check on him. "Are you all right?" they asked. The tortoise nodded, his head hung low. "I should have listened," he murmured. "I let pride get the better of me. I wanted to show off. I forgot the simple rule, not to speak." The ducks nodded gently. "Pride often leads to a fall," one said kindly. "You were brave, tortoise, but sometimes being wise is more important than being bold." From that day on, the tortoise never forgot the lesson he learned in the sky. He returned to his quiet life with a deeper understanding of himself. He still dreamed of adventure, but he also valued the wisdom of patience and silence. And though he never flew again, he often told his story to the young animals around, ending it with the simple truth: foolish pride and careless words can bring even the highest flyer back to the ground.
One quiet morning, as the sun stretched its golden arms across the countryside, a sleek black crow sat perched high in the branches of an old oak tree. Her feathers glistened like polished obsidian in the light, and in her beak she clutched a large, delicious piece of cheese. She had found it near a farmhouse and taken it as her prize. Now she rested in her favorite spot, intending to enjoy her breakfast in peace, far away from hungry eyes and greedy paws. She felt proud, not just for her find, but for her own cleverness in stealing it without being caught. The crow was content, and more than a little smug. But little did she know, trouble was already on its way. Trotting through the forest path below was a fox, sharp-eyed, sharp-witted, and always hungry. His stomach growled as he sniffed the air, catching the scent of something rich and creamy. He paused, his nose twitching, and followed the smell until he looked up and saw the crow in the tree, with the cheese firmly held in her beak. His eyes gleamed. He knew he couldn't climb the tree, nor could he scare the crow into dropping the cheese. But he didn't need to. What he had was far more powerful than claws or teeth. He had charm, and he had words. "Ah, what a magnificent sight!" the fox called out sweetly, stepping into the sunlight where the crow could see him clearly. "Is that a bird or a queen I see perched so high above me?" The crow blinked and looked down. She didn't speak, of course she couldn't without dropping her precious cheese, but her curiosity was piqued. No one had ever called her a queen before. The fox smiled wider, his voice smooth as silk. "Truly, I've never seen feathers so glossy, so dark and rich. The ravens must envy you and the doves must despair. But I wonder, do you have a voice to match such beauty? Surely a bird so lovely must sing like no other." The crow shifted slightly on her branch, her chest puffed up with pride. The flattery was working. She had always thought her cawing had a certain strength, even elegance. Perhaps the fox was right. Perhaps the world needed to hear her song. The fox continued, pacing slowly beneath the tree. "Please, just a note, one note, I would consider it the honor of my life." Unable to resist, overwhelmed by pride and eager to impress, the crow opened her beak to sing. The moment she did, the cheese slipped from her mouth and fell like a stone straight down into the fox's waiting jaws. Snap! The fox caught it easily and grinned up at the stunned crow, who now sat with an empty beak and a sinking heart. "My dear crow," said the fox, licking his lips, "your voice is indeed strong, but your judgment, I'm afraid, is rather weak." He chuckled and turned to walk away, tail swaying, already tasting victory in every bite. "Let this be a lesson," he called over his shoulder, "that flattery is often served with a side of trickery, and pride, my friend, can make fools of us all." The crow sat in silence, burning with shame. She had been outsmarted not by strength or speed, but by smooth words and her own vanity. The cheese was gone, and with it her morning joy. She looked down at the fox disappearing into the woods and realized that sometimes the sharpest hunters don't need claws at all, just clever tongues. From that day forward, the crow was never again swayed by compliments, no matter how sweet they sounded. She learned to see through empty praise and listen closely to the motives behind kind words. She still perched on her favorite branch, but with wiser eyes and a quieter pride. As for the fox, he continued his stroll through the forest, always on the lookout for his next meal and his next opportunity to flatter someone right out of their good sense. The story of the fox and the crow has lived on for generations, not just as a tale for amusement, but as a timeless reminder. Words are powerful tools, and when used with cunning, they can deceive even the smartest among us. Vanity, when left unchecked, makes us easy prey. So the next time someone showers you with compliments, especially when they have something to gain, remember the crow. Don't open your mouth too quickly. Don't let your pride speak louder than your reason, because sometimes the most dangerous traps are not hidden in the ground, but hidden in praise.
It was a scorching summer afternoon, and the sun blazed high in the sky, baking the earth below. In the heart of the savannah, where trees cast short shadows and water was scarce, a rare and precious spring lay hidden among the rocks. The spring was small but cool and clean, just enough to quench the thirst of those who found it. On this particular day, a powerful lion made his way to the spring. His tongue was dry, his throat parched, and the heat had worn his patience thin. All he wanted was a long, satisfying drink to ease the thirst that burned inside him. But just as he bent down to sip from the sparkling water, a loud grunt echoed nearby. Emerging from the opposite side of the spring came a large, muscular boar. His tusks were curved like scythes, and his eyes narrowed when he saw the lion. The boar, too, had come for water, and after a long, hot trek, he had no intention of waiting or sharing. He growled and stomped his hoof against the ground, challenging the lion with every ounce of pride and power he had. The lion lifted his head slowly, his golden mane bristling. Their eyes locked, and in that tense silence, the water between them seemed to shimmer with warning. Neither would back down. They were both strong, both proud, and both dangerously thirsty. A low rumble came from the lion's throat while the boar snorted and dug his hooves into the dirt. Words weren't needed. Each one knew what the other was thinking. In seconds, they lunged at one another. Dust flew into the air as the two beasts clashed. The lion's claws slashed and the boar's tusks struck like blades. They roared and snarled, grappled and shoved, their battle shaking the earth beneath them. Birds flew from nearby trees, startled by the chaos, and smaller animals scattered in every direction. The fight raged on, and though each animal was strong, neither could gain the upper hand. Sweat dripped, muscles ached, and yet they fought on, driven by pride and fury. Then, in a sudden pause, both combatants stepped back, breathing heavily, blood trickling from small wounds. As they stood catching their breath, something in the sky caught their attention. A group of vultures had gathered above, circling slowly. Their sharp eyes watched the fight below with greedy anticipation, waiting for one or both of the creatures to fall. The lion glanced up. The boar did too. For a moment, they were no longer opponents, but two animals staring at the same grim truth. The lion growled low, but not at the boar. "Look at them," he said, "waiting for one of us to die, perhaps both." The boar nodded, his voice deep and tired. "We kill each other here and we become their meal." Silence fell again, but it was different now. The spring still flowed gently between them, untouched. Both animals stood still, not out of fear, but out of understanding. What had begun as a fight for pride now revealed itself as something foolish. The world was wide, but dangers often waited for the proud and the hot-headed. And today, those dangers had wings and beaks. The lion stepped back, muscles still tense but no longer aggressive. "There is enough water for both of us," he said finally. "Let's not die over a drink." The boar hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed. We can both walk away, stronger for it." One after the other, they took turns drinking from the spring. The cool water refreshed them, washing away the heat of the day and the heat of their anger. Once their thirst was quenched, the lion turned and padded away into the tall grass. The boar did the same, heading in the opposite direction. Above, the vultures gave one final circle, then flapped their wings and flew off, disappointed. And so, what could have ended in bloodshed ended instead in wisdom. The lion and the boar both lived to see another day. Not because one won, but because both chose peace over pride. The fable reminds us of a simple yet powerful truth. In the heat of conflict, it's easy to forget what's truly important. But those who stop to think, those who choose reason over rage, often walk away with more than just victory. They walk away with life.
In the heart of an ancient forest, where the trees whispered old secrets and the wind carried the scent of pine and moss, a young fawn wandered near a shimmering brook. It was her first spring alone, and the world felt as big and mysterious as the sky above. She lowered her head to drink, her delicate legs still unsure on the uneven stones. As the cool water touched her tongue, a sudden rustle from the nearby thicket made her leap back, eyes wide. "Do not be afraid," came a calm, deep voice. From behind the trees stepped a magnificent stag, his antlers stretched like the limbs of a small tree, wide and sharp, gleaming in the sunlight that poured through the forest canopy. His coat was sleek, his muscles powerful. He carried himself with the grace of a creature who knew his strength well. The fawn stared in awe. "You're the most beautiful creature I've ever seen," she said in a hushed tone. The stag chuckled. "Beauty is only part of the story, young one. What brings you to this side of the woods?" "I was exploring," the fawn said, stepping forward again. "Everything here feels so peaceful, so safe." The stag looked around, his ears twitching at every sound. "It does seem that way. But peace in the forest is often a quiet moment before danger comes. You must always be alert." The fawn blinked. "But you're not afraid, are you? You have those strong legs and those huge antlers. I bet you could fight off anything." The stag tilted his head, amused. "That's what many think when they see me. My antlers are certainly grand. Every year they grow bigger. Animals admire them. Even men have tried to take them." The fawn frowned. "But if they're so powerful, why would you run? You could fight." The stag walked to the water's edge and looked at his reflection. "Let me tell you something I learned the hard way. These antlers may look strong, but they can be a curse as much as a blessing. When danger comes, and it always does, it's not my antlers that save me. It's these legs." He stamped the ground with one foreleg. "They may look plain, thin, and unremarkable, but they are fast. They carry me away from danger. The antlers, they can get caught in branches or slow me down." The fawn's eyes widened. "Really, but they look so majestic." "They do," the stag admitted, "but they're not what I depend on when my life is in danger. I've seen many a proud stag fall because he relied too much on what looked powerful instead of what truly was." The fawn stood still, thinking, "So what looks important isn't always the most important." "Exactly," said the stag, his voice gentle. "Sometimes what we take for granted is what saves us. What we show off is what fails us." Just then, a sharp crack echoed through the forest, a branch broken underfoot. The wind shifted. The stag sniffed the air, his muscles going rigid. "Hunter," he whispered, Without another word, he turned and bolted, his hooves barely touching the ground. The fawn hesitated for only a second before following, her small body darting through the underbrush. They raced through the trees, weaving between trunks, over fallen logs, and across stony paths. Behind them, a hunter stepped into the clearing, bow in hand, eyes alert. But all he saw was a flash of movement, too fast to track. Eventually, the stag and the fawn reached a rocky ridge. The forest opened up to the east, and they paused to catch their breath. The stag looked down toward the glade where they'd been. "We were lucky," he said quietly. The fawn panted, her sides heaving. "You were right. Your antlers. They almost got caught in that thick patch of branches." He nodded. "And yet my legs carried me out, just as they always have." The fawn looked down at her own legs, slender and trembling. "I used to think I wasn't strong just because I don't look it, but maybe that's not what strength is." "Now you're learning," the stag said, smiling. "The forest teaches all of us if we are willing to listen." They stood side by side for a while, watching the wind stir the treetops. "Will you stay with me a little longer?" the fawn asked. "I want to learn more from you." The stag nodded. "I will stay until the sun sets. After that, you must trust your own legs, because one day it will be you running alone." And so the fawn walked beside the stag through the forest that afternoon, listening carefully to every word, learning to look not just with her eyes, but with her heart. She learned to value the quiet strength in her limbs, the way the earth moved beneath her hooves, and how true safety lay not in what dazzled, but in what endured. The moral of the stories teaches us, we often admire outward beauty and strength, but it is the humble, hidden qualities that protect and preserve us when it matters most.
Once upon a time, in the peaceful countryside where golden fields met a slow, winding stream, there lived a little brown mouse. She was a field mouse, curious, clever, and always on the lookout for new adventures. Her days were spent scurrying through tall grasses, collecting seeds, nibbling on wild berries, and occasionally stopping to sniff the breeze. Life was simple, and she was content. One sunny afternoon, as the mouse ventured a little farther than usual, she found herself at the edge of a sparkling stream. The water shimmered under the sunlight, and the air was filled with the gentle croaks of frogs. Fascinated by the sounds and smells of this unfamiliar place, the mouse tiptoed closer. Suddenly, a voice called out from a nearby lily pad. "Hello there, little mouse," said a green frog with bulging eyes and a friendly smile. "What brings you to the water's edge?" Startled but polite, the mouse replied, "I'm just exploring. I've never been this close to water before. It's very different from the fields I know." The frog's eyes lit up. He rarely had visitors from the land, and the idea of showing off his watery world thrilled him. But as he looked at the mouse, a mischievous idea began to form in his mind. With a wide grin, he said, "Would you like to see what it's like in the water? It's a wonderful place. Peaceful, fun, and full of surprises. I could take you on a little tour." The mouse hesitated. "I'm not sure. I don't know how to swim." "Oh, don't worry," the frog assured her quickly. "I'll help you. We'll stay close together. Here, let me tie us with this blade of grass so we don't get separated." Trusting the frog, the mouse agreed. The frog tied one end of the long grass string around his own leg and the other end around the mouse's tiny ankle. Then, with a splash, he leapt into the water, gently pulling the mouse along behind him. At first it was magical. The mouse floated on a lily pad, marveling at the way the water rippled around her. She laughed with delight as the frog swam small circles around her, occasionally splashing playfully. It was a strange new world, but it felt like an adventure. She'd never imagined water could be so fun. But suddenly, everything changed. Without warning, the frog dove deeper into the stream, tugging the mouse along with him. The grass string tightened around her ankle, pulling her off the lily pad and into the water. The mouse shrieked in panic. "Wait! Stop! I can't swim! You're pulling me in!" she cried, struggling against the pull of the grass rope. But the frog only croaked with amusement. Whether it was a cruel joke or a wicked plan, the frog seemed to enjoy her fear. The mouse flailed and splashed, trying to keep her head above water. But she was no swimmer. Her tiny limbs grew tired and her breath grew short. Within moments, the worst happened. The mouse drowned. The lifeless body floated on the surface, still tied by the string to the frog's leg. And the frog, perhaps realizing too late the weight of his actions, blinked uncertainly at what he had done. But fate was not yet finished. High above, circling in the sky, a sharp-eyed hawk scanned the ground below for food. His keen vision spotted the floating mouse, an easy meal. With powerful wings, the hawk swooped down toward the water. In an instant, he snatched up the mouse with his talons. But the hawk didn't notice the grass string, or the frog still tied to it. As the hawk ascended back into the sky, the frog was yanked from the water, still bound to the mouse. He squawked and flailed helplessly as he was carried into the air, realizing far too late the price of his trick. He had taken pleasure in the mouse's suffering, but now he too would face the same fate. And so, both mouse and frog were carried off into the sky, victims of one creature's selfish mischief. This simple fable leaves us with a powerful lesson. Those who plan harm for others often bring misfortune upon themselves. Cruelty, no matter how small it may seem, carries consequences. The frog thought he could play a trick and escape unscathed, but in the end, his actions led to his own downfall. As AESOP wisely said, "He who plots mischief against others often falls into his own trap."
Once upon a time, in a dense, vibrant jungle, lived a rat named Remy and an elephant named Alara. Remy, small and quick, scurried across the forest floor, always on the lookout for food and trouble. Alara, on the other hand, was a gentle giant, her massive size and calm nature making her a figure of respect and admiration among the jungle creatures. Remy and Alara lived on opposite sides of the jungle, and they had never really interacted with one another. Remy had always been fascinated by the elephant's majestic presence, but was too intimidated by her size to approach. Alara, in turn, would occasionally hear the rustling of Remy and his rat friends in the underbrush, but never thought much of it. One bright sunny day, a great storm suddenly blew through the jungle. The winds howled and the skies turned dark with thunder. The rain came pouring down in sheets, flooding the jungle and washing away the smaller animals' homes. Remy, caught in the torrential downpour, scurried desperately for shelter. "Where will I go?" he thought, his tiny heart pounding in fear. "Everything is getting flooded." Alara, too, had been caught in the storm. Her massive feet sunk into the mud as she tried to find higher ground. She knew she was strong enough to survive the storm, but she also worried for the smaller animals who might not fare as well. The rain continued to pour, and soon Remy found himself struggling to swim against the strong currents. The floodwaters rose quickly, and before he knew it, he was swept away, helpless in the rushing torrent. As fate would have it, Alara had found a safe patch of land, a large rock outcropping where the waters hadn't reached. She stood tall, using her trunk to help others to safety when she saw a tiny, struggling figure in the water. "Is that a rat?" Alara wondered aloud, leaning closer. "I must help!" Using her powerful trunk, Alara reached into the water and gently scooped up Remy, lifting him high above the floodwaters. "Hold on tight, little one," she said in a soft, comforting voice. Remy, drenched and shivering, clung to the trunk as Alara carefully pulled him up onto the rock outcropping. He was exhausted and scared, but felt a strange sense of relief when he was placed safely on solid ground. Thank you," Remy squeaked, his tiny tiny voice full of gratitude. "I thought I was a goner." Alara smiled kindly, her big eyes sparkling with warmth. "It's no trouble at all. You were in trouble, and I couldn't just let you float away." For a moment, Remy was speechless. He had always thought of elephants as distant, powerful creatures, unreachable in their grandeur. But here was Alara standing before him, not as a towering giant, but as a kind, caring friend. "How can I ever repay you?" Remy asked, his whiskers twitching. Alara chuckled softly. "You don't need to repay me, little one. We all have our roles in the jungle. I protect the big animals, and you help the small ones." Remy thought for a moment. "Maybe there's something I can do," he said eagerly. "I might be small, but I'm fast. I can go places that even you can't reach. Maybe I can help you find food or warn you if danger is coming." Alara nodded thoughtfully. "That's a wonderful idea, Remy. We might be different in size, but that doesn't mean we can't help each other." From that day on, Remy and Alara became the best of friends. They discovered that even though they were completely different, their strengths complemented each other perfectly. Alara would use her size to help carry heavy loads, while Remy would scamper off into tight spaces to find food or scout ahead for danger. One day when a terrible fire broke out in the jungle, it was Remy who scurried through the trees and warned Alara. With her quick thinking, Alara was able to guide the other animals to safety, using her massive size to lead them through the smoke and chaos. "You saved us again, Remy," Alara said gratefully as the last of the animals reached safety. And Remy, with a proud puff of his tiny chest, replied, "We saved each other, Alara." From that day forward, the jungle animals no longer saw Remy as just a small rat or Alara as just a giant elephant. They saw them as a pair, two friends bound not by their size, but by their friendship and their willingness to help one another no matter what. The jungle thrived, and so did the bond between the rat and the elephant, who showed the world that strength doesn't always come in the form of size. Sometimes the smallest creature can make the biggest difference. The moral of the story teaches us that no matter how small you are, you have something valuable to offer. Strength comes in many forms, and by helping each other, we can achieve great things.
Long ago, in a quiet, sun-drenched valley bordered by whispering pines and rolling hills, there lived a peaceful flock of sheep. The sheep grazed daily in green meadows under the watchful eyes of the shepherd and his loyal dog. Life was simple, safe, predictable. But just beyond the hills in the shadowy depths of the forest lurked a wolf. He was clever, cunning, and always hungry. This was no ordinary wolf. His fur was scarred, his eyes cold as ice, and though he had the strength to overpower most animals in the forest, he'd grown tired of the chase. He wanted an easier way to get what he craved, a feast of tender lamb. One crisp morning, the wolf crouched behind a rock and watched the flock from a distance. "They're so careless," he sneered. "No fences, no fear, just wool and foolishness." Then he had an idea. Later that day, the wolf crept up to the edge of the meadow after the flock had returned to their pen. There, caught on a branch, was the pelt of a sheep, left behind after the shearing season. With slow, deliberate motions, the wolf draped the skin over his body. It itched and smelled of lanolin, but it fit well enough. When morning came, the wolf joined the flock. At first, the sheep were suspicious. One sheep, an older ewe named Clara, squinted at the newcomer. "You smell odd," she muttered. "I'm new here," said the wolf, lowering his voice. "From the northern valley, long journey." The others nodded, accepting him without question. Sheep are trusting by nature, after all. For days, the wolf walked among them, blending in with remarkable ease. He moved slowly, kept his head down, and spoke little. By the end of the week, even Clara had stopped questioning him. The wolf learned their names, their routines, where the shepherd placed his lunch, where the lambs slept. But what the wolf didn't expect was the warmth. One morning, a lamb tripped while running, scraping its leg. The wolf instinctively leaned in, jaws twitching, but instead of fear, the lamb smiled. "Thanks for checking on me," it said. "You're kind." Kind? The word stung more than a thorn in his paw. Another day, Clara invited the new sheep to nap under a tree beside her. She shared stories of her youth and asked about his journeys. The wolf made up tales, but something about her gentle voice made him pause. As days turned to weeks, the wolf found himself hesitating. He had the perfect opportunity. The shepherd had left the pen open one evening. The dog was asleep. The lambs were grazing near the forest line, but he didn't move. Instead, he stood still, conflicted. That night under the stars, the wolf sat alone, sheep's wool draped around his shoulders. He looked at the flock, huddled together in peace. For the first time in his life, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar: guilt. But hunger has a way of silencing conscience. The next morning, the wolf awoke with a decision. "Tonight," he whispered, "tonight I will feast." He eyed a young lamb grazing near the edge, separated from the rest. But Clara had noticed the change in his eyes. That night, as the wolf crept toward the lamb, he didn't see the glint of the shepherd's knife behind the barn, nor the silent growl of the dog creeping through the grass. Clara had spoken to the shepherd. "Something's not right," she'd said. "He's not one of us." And the shepherd had listened. Just as the wolf lunged, shedding his disguise, the dog pounced with a furious bark. The shepherd shouted, and before the wolf could escape, a net fell upon him. Struggling beneath the weight of the ropes, the wolf snarled. "You trusted me," he roared. "You lied to us," Clara replied, her voice firm. The wolf was dragged away, never to be seen again. The flock was shaken, but grateful. From then on, the shepherd kept a closer eye. And Clara, old and wise, became the voice the others listened to. But the story didn't end there. Word of the wolf in sheep's clothing spread far and wide, becoming a tale passed from pasture to pasture. It became a warning, a lesson carved in memory. The moral of the story teaches us that not everyone who walks beside you means well. Some wear disguises and speak sweetly, but their intentions are sharp as fangs. Trust is a gift, one that should be given wisely.
In the golden heart of the savannah, where the grasses swayed like waves under the wind and the skies stretched endlessly above, there lived a lion named Kazi. He was mighty, proud, and powerful. His golden mane gleamed in the sun, and his roar could shake the trees and send birds fleeing into the sky. Kazi was feared across the land, and for good reason. He was the king of all beasts, strong, swift, and wise. Most animals stepped aside when they heard his footsteps. He needed no pack, no partner, and certainly no help, or so he thought. One hot afternoon, the lion found a shaded spot under a wide acacia tree. The ground was cool and soft, the branches above thick enough to block out the blazing sun. Kazi let out a contented sigh, lowered his head, and drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. Nearby, a small creature was on the move, a mouse, no bigger than a pebble. Her name was Tamu. She was quick, curious, and always hungry. As she scurried through the tall grass, looking for seeds or berries, she found herself beneath the very tree where Kazi lay sleeping. She didn't see the lion until it was too late. In one quick misstep, she darted across his paw. With a loud, angry roar, Kazi's eyes flew open. His massive paw slammed down, trapping the mouse beneath it. Tamu squeaked in fright, her tiny heart pounding like a drum. "Who dares to wake the king of the savannah?" Kazi growled, his eyes narrowing. I'm so sorry, Your Majesty," the mouse stammered. "I didn't mean to disturb you, I was just passing through. Please don't eat me. If you let me go, I promise I'll repay you one day." The lion blinked, Then he laughed, a deep rumbling sound that made the leaves tremble. You? Repay me? What could a mouse like you ever do for a lion like me? I don't know, Tamu said, trembling. But kindness has a way of finding its way back. Kazi tilted his head. The mouse was brave. Foolish, perhaps, but brave. And something in her eyes, a spark of sincerity, stirred something inside him. With a grunt, he lifted his paw and let her go. Run along, little one, he said. You're lucky I'm not in the mood for a snack. Tamu gave a deep bow, her whiskers twitching. Thank you. I won't forget this. And she didn't. A few days later, trouble came. Hunters entered the savannah. They moved silently through the grasses, carrying ropes, nets, and cruel traps. They were skilled and patient, and they knew where to find their prize. That morning, Kazi wandered far from his usual territory. He was curious about the distant plains and had followed the scent of antelope across unfamiliar ground. That's when it happened. With a sudden snap, a hidden trap sprang from the grass. Ropes wrapped around his legs and yanked him into the air. He roared and thrashed, but the more he struggled, the tighter the ropes became. He was trapped, completely and utterly. His cries echoed for miles. Birds flew from trees. Zebras galloped in fear. But one tiny creature ran toward the sound. Tamu heard the lion's roar and didn't hesitate. She raced through the grass, leaping over roots and dodging stones until she found him. Hanging upside down from a tree, his golden mane tangled in ropes. Kazi! She cried. The lion turned his head. His eyes were filled with pain and disbelief. Mouse? He said weakly. Go. Run. The hunters. They're coming. But Tamu didn't run. She climbed the tree, fast and fearless, until she reached the thick ropes. Then, using her tiny teeth, she began to gnaw. The ropes were rough and thick, but she didn't stop. She bit and pulled and chewed with all her strength. Down below, the lion watched in silence. Every second counted. The hunters were close. He could hear their voices now, laughing, talking, coming nearer. And just when hope seemed to run out, snap. One rope broke, then another. And with a final desperate bite, the last rope gave way. Kazi fell to the ground with a heavy thud, but he was free. Without a word, the lion leapt to his feet, grabbed the mouse gently in his jaws, and ran. Through thorns, across rivers, past startled herds, until they were safe. Far from the danger, beneath the same acacia tree, the lion finally stopped. He laid the mouse down and looked at her with wide, grateful eyes. You saved my life, he whispered. You saved mine first, Tamu replied. The lion smiled, a warm, genuine smile. You were right, he said. Kindness always finds its way back. From that day forward, Kazi and Tamu became the most unlikely of friends. The lion, powerful and proud. The mouse, small but mighty in heart. Together they reminded the savannah and everyone who heard their tale that no creature is too small to make a difference, and no act of kindness is ever wasted.
Once upon a time, in a peaceful meadow surrounded by tall trees and wildflowers, lived two neighbors, an ant and a grasshopper. They were as different as night and day. The ant, small but mighty, woke up every morning with a mission. He would gather food, build his home stronger, and prepare for the colder months ahead. While the sun was still rising, the ant was already on his way, carrying bits of food twice his size, determined and focused. The grasshopper, on the other hand, was more laid back. He loved music, laughter, and the sound of the breeze through the grass. He'd sit on a leaf, strumming his tiny violin made from a twig and spider silk, and sing songs that made the forest come alive. One sunny morning, the grasshopper saw the ant dragging a heavy crumb back to his anthill. Hey, ant! Why not take a break? The sun is shining, the breeze is perfect, and I just made up a new tune. He called out cheerfully. The ant didn't even slow down. I'd love to, grasshopper, but winter's coming. I need to be ready. Winter? That's months away. Live a little. The grasshopper laughed, twirling in the air. There's plenty of time for work later. The ant paused just for a second. That's what you said yesterday and the day before that. Good luck, grasshopper. Then he disappeared into his hill. Days turned into weeks. Summer turned to fall. The trees turned gold, the wind grew colder, and the air carried the scent of change. The ant kept working. He lined his home with leaves, stored food in neat piles, and made sure everything was sealed tight. And the grasshopper? He played, he sang, he danced, he made new songs, told stories to passing butterflies, and napped in the sun. Then, without warning, the first snow fell. It was light at first, a flurry of white against the gray sky. But by nightfall, the meadow was covered in frost. The flowers wilted, the wind howled, the ground turned hard and cold. The grasshopper woke up to a frozen world. No more green leaves, no more warm sun, he whispered, shivering. His violin was cracked from the cold. His usual hiding spots were buried under snow. There was no food, no shelter. Desperate and cold, he remembered the ant. Maybe, just maybe. He hopped slowly through the snow, his legs numb, until he reached the ant's hill. He knocked gently on the tiny door. The door creaked open, and there stood the ant, wrapped in warmth, a cozy glow behind him. Grasshopper? The ant said in surprise. What are you doing out in the cold? I didn't prepare. I didn't listen. I thought I had more time, the grasshopper said, his voice trembling. The ant looked at him, eyes kind but firm. I warned you, many times. I know, said the grasshopper. I was foolish, but I'm here now. Please, can I come in? The ant hesitated. His home wasn't big. His food was carefully measured. Letting someone else in meant sharing everything and maybe going without later. But the ant remembered the grasshopper's songs, how they made the days lighter, the air sweeter. He sighed. Come in, the ant said quietly. You'll help me clean and sort, and you'll play your music again when spring comes. The grasshopper's eyes lit up, grateful and humble. I promise, I'll work hard, no more wasting time. And so, the grasshopper learned. Inside the ant's warm home, he helped wherever he could. He listened. He learned the value of planning, of working for the future, and in return, he brought joy. When the days were long and the snow was thick, he played soft melodies that made even the cold feel warm. When spring finally arrived, the two stepped outside into the sun, together. From that day on, the grasshopper still played his songs but never forgot to work first. And the ant? He learned that sometimes balance is the key. Not just work, not just play, but both in harmony. The moral of the story teaches us that there's a time to work and a time to play. Prepare for the future, but don't forget to bring a little music along the way.